Welcome to Permission to Evolve. I'm your host, Brandon Thielk. I'm a performance and life coach. I'm joined by my co-host and producer, Holly Deschenes. So today we're going to get into this idea of the permission to recalibrate relationships. Yeah, it's been coming up a lot in my session work, so I want to get into that. But first, I want to talk about your trip a little bit.
Yeah.
So you went to Spain for Marbella, Spain for the 70.3 World Championships, and then got to do exploring. So I just want to get into maybe some takeaways, some cool moments, maybe some reflections now that you've had a little bit of time and space.
It's funny you say that there's been time or space. I was joking with a few of the people that we went with this morning about how it's going to take me 30 to 45 days to process this physically, emotionally, mentally,
Hmm.
and spiritually. So we're not even close to that. But yeah, I think it was great. I love the World Championship race vibe. Ironman does a great job as an event organizer and all that. So that the race itself was amazing. The course was super awesome. I wasn't racing, my husband was, but he loved it, all of it. Yeah, so all of that was really great. Being in Spain was fun. This was the first time I'd been to Europe. So all of that, yeah, it took a lot of the intimidation about like flying across the Atlantic away, where I'm
Hmm.
like, oh yeah, this is actually no big deal. This is easier
Hmm.
than going to Hawaii in all reality. So,
Yeah,
uh,
actually it is.
yeah. So that was super cool. Spain was very friendly and yeah, it was a cool place.
What was your favorite part about the culture? Or was there any like favorite food you tried?
We ate a lot of food. I don't know that I would have a favorite because everywhere we went, I liked what we had, so it didn't feel like I could pick a favorite. It seems to be a very laid back culture, and Marbella as a place felt very melting pot ish while we were there. Oftentimes we get tattoos when we go on these big trips as like a commemorative thing. This trip
Hmm.
was no different, but the tattoo shop that we went to, the couple that ran it were French. And so there's
Oh,
sort
cool.
of this like they've been in Marbella for 15 years. And so it very much gave this vibe of like everyone is welcome here and everybody can kind of
Hmm.
make their way here. I really appreciated that kind of feeling. It wasn't like we were stupid Americans, which can sometimes be the feeling.
Well, it's cool. So you guys got like zodiac signs, right? Was it?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And a couple other things. Whatever, it's a problem. It's fine.
I mean, that's the thing is well, especially my first time going to Europe. Yeah, there's like the reservations of like, oh, will people be able to speak English? And, will I stumble through it? And yeah, you get there. Yeah, it's pretty welcoming. I've never had any really negative experiences. It's just a mixture of everybody, especially a tourist area. Like it's pretty seamless and easy. Yeah, my trip to Europe this year, with Paris and Ibiza and Barcelona and all
Yeah.
that, it was. Yeah, I got sick for a week afterwards, and then it felt like it took me even like a few days after that to like get back on track. It's just so much to process and take in. Especially my trip was like 17 days.
Yeah.
So it's just, yeah, it's like it just all feels like a blur, and then you just like integrate slowly over time. But yeah, I guess I don't even feel like I've fully caught up to it, and it's
No.
been a couple months now. So
Yeah, we didn't even talk about it. Well, you and I talked about it, but we didn't even talk about it on the podcast at all about your experience in Spain, only your experience in Nice.
well, yeah, I went over to San Sebastian. I've been hearing a lot of cool things about the food there. I don't know, they do these things. Well, so Spain's famous for tapas, but they call them pinkstos there, which is like their version. But yeah, it's like they all just have these counters full of this food, and it's like they're super competitive, so they all try to make the best ones. And yeah, everything's super cheap and it's on the water. It's like stunning. So that was a really cool experience. That had been on my radar for about a year now. But yeah, I don't know if you remember like Anthony Bourdain, when he'd
Yeah.
do his thing, I guess like he like loved that place and always talked about it. So it's just kind of known for its food, but there's really so much more to it. And then, yeah, went up to Paris to meet my girlfriend, and she had been before, but, was much younger at the time. Like it was like during college or something. So yeah, that was my first time there, and I love big cities. So it kind of checks all the boxes for me. There's a culture, and I was just like kind of amazed at like the magnitude of there had to be like 200 museums or something like that. It was just like all the art and culture there, was pretty mind-boggling. And then I wasn't a fan of the traffic there. It felt like forever. It took you forever to get anywhere. So you got to take the train or walk. But yeah, just I love to try new foods. Did the escargot and foie gras and like all that stuff. There's some animal rights violations with foie gras, but
Yeah, I was like,
but yeah, it's part of French culture, so you got to like try it, right? And then I went to Barcelona, which I had been last year. So it's kind of my girlfriend didn't go last year, so I kind of just took her around to see all the sites that I had gotten to see, and so it was almost like a redo for me. So it was very familiar. Yeah, just kind of a cool town on the beach or city on the beach, and then yeah, the one it was kind of like always on my bucket list was like Ibiza. I was just like, I just want to go there one time and see what it's like because you like hear so much about it. And yeah, so it was my friend's 40th birthday, so he wanted to celebrate there, and it was just like a really interesting. You get the beautiful beach vibe and all that, but then I'm not like huge into like EDM or DJs or anything like that, but he is. That was kind of part of it. But yeah, I just really like enjoyed the magnitude of it. It's funny, we went to this like nightclub called Universe, and it's like this brand new club, and it's the biggest in the world and the most expensive and all that. And they like just came out with this list of like the top clubs in the world, and that was number one. And then there's two other ones from Ibiza. Like, so the top three were all in Ibiza. And, it's like, I don't know, it's just kind of cool to see like the creativity, behind, developing these venues and like the scale it's on. It's really like interesting to see. And yeah, I don't know. I think I liked it more than I thought I would, that kind of
yeah,
thing.
that's
Because
cool.
it was mostly to like, go for his birthday and stuff. But what was funny is like he mostly just did the beach stuff and didn't do like the club DJ stuff. But me and my girlfriend did, and we really enjoyed it. What was cool is there's just like a mixture. There's such a mixture of people where you think going to these places is all going to be like young people in their 20s, but it was people from 20 to like 70. It was just every demographic, like everything, across the board where, yeah, it's just like kind of a cool thing to make you feel alive, I think. And, I know in Europe, like they're really big into club culture, like their whole lives, basically. So it was kind of interesting to see that firsthand.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds cool.
But yeah, so just kind of getting into our topic today. So, as I stated, there's a lot of readjusting relationships going on. And, it's such a big part of my work, I would say. You know, we have especially relationships that have lasted a long time. So that's like family members. It's, maybe high school friends, college friends, people from different stages of our lives. And, you know, if you're on the growth path, things are going to always shift and change. What maybe suited you at one point might not feel authentic anymore. And everybody's shifting and changing, and some people get a little bit stuck where they're not growing anymore, and then it kind of creates a little bit of this gap. And I'm not like a big just throw people away person or cut off relationships. Usually it's like I'm more of a like, let's update the relationship if we can. And so that means doing a lot of recalibration work. So that's about being able to speak authentically, communicate your needs, have the tough conversations if you feel like you're giving too much and not getting anything in return. It's these imbalances that, there are some relationships, the ones that we've really outgrown, or we just basically feel like we get nothing out of them anymore. And it's just like, we're just always giving to the other person with nothing in return. And so it's this, healthy relationships, there's a balance to it. It's about giving and receiving and, really being present with somebody. And, a lot of people like, they might just not be in the place in their life where they're emotionally available, right? So it's they might not have the capacity to support us in the way that we need. A lot of times it's about just being in tune with that. Somebody might be experiencing like challenges, and with work or, their family or whatever it is, like they might be under extra stress where they might not be able to meet us where we want them to. And so, these things generally are going to have an ebb and flow to them. It's just like taking inventory of like, yeah, which relationships like really no longer serve me anymore, but like which ones are really meaningful to me and just need some adjustments. It's kind of it takes that step back because, generally when we hear ourselves, maybe complaining about the same problem over and over again, or being frustrated with somebody, that's kind of our clue for a readjustment is like, this isn't working in its current form and I'm not at peace with it. So then we kind of start to look at, like, what could be done differently? What can I communicate? How can I adjust my expectations of this person to be maybe more in alignment with where they're currently at rather than what I want from them, right? I might be holding too high of a standard. I might be requiring too much for them that they don't have that capacity to give me. And then that leads to a lot of disappointment. And in some stages where we feel like we're giving all the time, that could almost like lead to resentment as well, right? And so that's where we really get into kind of that sticky situation, is when we're like holding so many things against another person, but they might not even be aware of it either, right? Like they might think they're doing everything fine, but if we're not able to speak up or communicate, there's all this resentment building, and then maybe we're being passive aggressive and just kind of hoping they pick up on the clues. But a lot of these times it's really just like takes a direct conversation to just kind of maybe understand the other person better, or maybe communicate with them, like, maybe where we feel things have gotten off track, and just try and see if there's something to build from. It's relationships are important, but just like anything in life, they take work, and it's ongoing work. Nothing's just kind of set and you don't need to do anything anymore. It's this continually re-engaging with it to bring it to a better place, because once that resentment builds, that can lead to bitterness, things like that, where now we're being very judgmental of the other person. And now we're in this like tug of war battle where they don't feel comfortable around us anymore because all the things have stacked up. So, it's about owning our part in the relationship. It's also about getting in tune with reality and like understanding where those people are functioning from, and like how we can navigate it from there rather than hanging on to the previous version of them. Everybody does have things going on in their life, and some things we struggle through worse than others, and it kind of just depends on the phase they're in.
I recently read a post that someone did about relationships taking work to that point. So I would love for us to go deeper on that. But this was that idea of you have to be an active participant sort of in these relationships. And it isn't how we can maybe have the wrong idea based on social media or TV shows or whatever, and how we get these ideas in our head of how things should look without having these understandings of, especially as an adult, the effort that needs to go into maintaining friendships or just relationships in general. Yeah, so I would love for us to talk a little bit more about that.
There's all these studies on why it's so difficult to have adult relationships, right? It's a common thing, especially if, somebody starts to form their own family and that's where their priorities lie and like all those things. It's, these things are difficult, and, we all have our own capacities, and priorities might shift. And so things might kind of naturally start to shift, fall away, just because life happened. But then there's also, this idea that the things that are meaningful to you in any area of life, it's like you kind of owe it to yourself to put the time, energy, and effort into it, right? To maintain and build it. And so much like goes unspoken, so much like, we might have these expectations of other people, but they're not aware of them and they think they're doing everything right. And so it's the biggest challenge is like up-leveling our communication, I would say. Like that's the part that takes work, because like if I'm not feeling at peace with something, a lot of times it's like I don't want to speak up about that either, right? I think a lot of us learn that from childhood, where, we were supposed to be easy, or, just kind of go along with things, and not really actually speak up about our needs. I think it's a common wound for many people. And, because you don't want to disappoint another person. You don't want to be an inconvenience. You don't want to, be needy, like those types of things. So a lot of times the resistance to that is actually what destroys the relationship, is like there's all this stuff building in the background, but it's never getting addressed. When we talk about like online dating and things like that, where people are just really in this mode of like, if I don't like something about somebody, I just kind of throw them away and go try and find somebody new, right? And so, That's the thing. It's sad. Relationships can be a tremendous source of growth, right? It's like you want people that you can be yourself around. You want people that you can communicate authentically with. And in that, it's like, we need support too. It's like, maybe we're struggling with something and we just need to get some things off our chest. Having people there where you don't feel so alone, like, can be, a tremendous gift. But whatever we're requiring of somebody else, we have to be willing to give as well. It's to maintain that balance of, if I'm going through a tough time and I need extra things from people, kind of need to acknowledge that once I like come out of it, like maybe I'm going to play that role for somebody. It's finding those things of it. It goes both ways. If there's a disconnect outside of the simple like life changes thing, it's going to be because there's some things that aren't being addressed. It's going to be, we want things that we care enough about to put the work into, right? The acquaintances, like surface level relationships, things people we don't have a big shared history with. It's just kind of easier because there's not that deeper connection there. But the ones that are meaningful to us, like we do want to take the care to make sure that person's okay, that we're continually on the same page, that conflicts get resolved. That is tough work, right? Because it's uncomfortable work. Nobody wants to do those things, but there's always a growth on the other side of it, right? There's, because think of all the misunderstandings that happen where people are just making assumptions, and then pretty soon the relationship's like, you know, there's nothing left to it because all these things were just misunderstandings. So it's about being able to communicate with people and create the understanding. But it's also like the realization that, not everybody has emotional depth, is like comfortable in emotional depth. And so they may want to stay at the surface and pretend everything's okay, but they're disconnected from their emotions. And so with any relationship, we kind of need a willing participant to work with. And so that's that signal of emotional availability of like, okay, this person has the capacity to meet me here. Because some people, if they're more on the surface, it's gonna be uncomfortable and they're gonna avoid it and probably run away from it. So it's just kind of knowing who those people are, where if it's gonna be a surface level relationship, there's almost got to be a level of acceptance with this of like, I'm not asking for more than this person can give. I think we need all the full range of a relationship, right? We need the kind of more surface stuff where we're not thinking that deeply and it's just kind of like fun to hang out with somebody. But then there's also like the people that I like to have deep conversations with, and that kind of fills my soul a little bit, right? So I think we need the full range of things. And the amount of energy you put into something is generally what you want to get back, right? So that's those one-sided relationships. Like I might have this previous version of a person locked in my mind where, maybe we were really close and maybe, they did really see me and hear me and were able to meet me where I was at one point, but they might not be there anymore. I might have those expectations of them still, and that might be leading to the conflict where, they don't actually have much to give anymore. And so I might just need to kind of accept where they're at too. And then just kind of work through those ideas of like, is this still worth it to me? Do I need to detach and grieve this relationship, or, are there some pieces that can be salvaged here? It's everything here is like multidimensional. There's no like easy answer. But if you notice things are really bugging you, it's like we definitely want people in our life that, we can resolve situations with, because those are the relationships that are going to grow. And so it's just being in tune with whether the struggle is one that I can grow with or one that's like, it's kind of a deal breaker. Right. And so and that's the thing is it sucks. Sometimes we just have to be honest with ourselves and call things what they are. It's finding the areas where there can be some compromise, some give and take, acceptance of where they're at. Maybe if they can't meet me in the way that I want them to, like, how can I get that fulfillment somewhere else? Right. I think a big one I've been hearing lately is, people are talking about, this dynamic of marriage where, people used to be kind of a lot more community oriented. They used to like have to go to the office every day. They used to have to do all these different things where they weren't requiring so much from their partner, right? Because they were getting those needs met in other ways. And so it's really been this shift towards, my partner is supposed to check all those boxes for me, right? That puts like a lot of pressure on things. And especially, I think with guys don't usually put in as much work to maintain relationships. We're generally less social. And so, a lot of times it's like the wife and all her friends and then the husband, and
I
so
live
it's
that
it's just
life.
like, yeah, it's the imbalance. So they're like, yeah, like guys need other guys to hang out with because that fulfills a different need that their wife can't possibly ever meet, right? And so it's just kind of seeing these things as like, well, yeah, maybe we've put too much emphasis on one relationship, and maybe some of that stuff can be spread across the board a little bit, where it doesn't feel so daunting to have to like meet all those needs for one person. There's so many different ways we can look at this. But the bottom line is like if you want good relationships, it does take work. It does take being true to what you feel and being able to communicate that and hopefully have somebody that's receptive on the other end, those types of things.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's interesting that all makes sense to me for the work I do outside of the podcast. I had read something that was similar along the lines of like the pressure that's now put on workplaces to fulfill the sense of community and belonging for people that used to be in churches and groups and other
Mhm.
places that it's not as much today. So a similar idea.
Well, there's this idea that I keep hearing about. It's like the third space or third place I don't know, something
Yeah.
of like, yeah, people used to have like different places they would go to regularly, and that would, yeah, have the community built in and all that stuff. But now it's just like it's either like home or work and that's it, or, it's like we've kind of chopped off like one dynamic. And so the other areas like have to pick up all that slack, and it's like making the work out to be like, oh yeah, I need to like meet all these needs outside of like you coming here and doing your work and that kind of thing. I don't know if it's like good or bad, it just kind of is. It's just like, well, when, I think we all have basic human needs, and we need outlets for things, other, because if we can just, and that's part of like the dangers of the phone, right? Is like if I'm uncomfortable, I can just scroll and stuff, and like that makes me feel like I'm being connected to something when I'm really not. There's all these things that are like kind of interesting, like problems of our time, I guess, where, yeah, like relationship has gotten like more superficial in a lot of ways. But I think with that, I think there's a lot of people like craving the deeper stuff too. They're craving that connection more and more. And that's why, with all like the AI stuff, like I guess I don't have too many concerns about that being our life moving forward as everything's just robots, because it's just like, people like need human connection. Like that's like always going to be there, right? Even with coaching, I think it's like that's the importance of more having like in-person events and things like that for people to come to, because yeah, we're all just lost on these screens all the time. I think it's just that's always going to be a human need, that we're always going to need connection. And sometimes you have to kind of swing too far one direction to realize like, okay, we need to rebalance things out. And that's really what we're talking about here, is it's just that recognition of like, there's something missing here or something's off. What adjustments do I need to make to kind of get back to my center, to rebalance my relationships, to feel that human connection again? Because, when we have conflict in relationship, people get on guard, and then that disconnects that connection. I can't feel the other person now because they're in protection, right? The walls are up. And so now it's like we have to continuously work towards that connection because life happens. And so sometimes that things are way out of balance, and it takes a lot of work, right? And you'll see this a lot with parent relationships. If I'm carrying all these things from childhood, you know, and I become an adult and I like do things differently, now there's this huge disconnect. And so you have to like really work to heal those things to really kind of connect back with your parents, and that's one of the most difficult things I think a lot of people go through. It just feels like it's so much work to get back there. But that's it. It's like, how can I forgive? How can I make adjustments? Like, some of those dynamics, it's like parents don't want to like give up the authority role, right? So they're like telling you what to do and like all that stuff. That leads to disconnection as well. And so it's always about shifting and updating relationships so that they're balanced. And And they're built on this idea of mutual like respect and love and acceptance and all those things rather than judgment and resentment and conflicts.
Sure. We're talking about the work it takes to get back, and you and I had a conversation earlier today where we talked about like also finding like where you have ownership in the work that needs to be done. So I think there's something there I'd like to talk about, but then also this came up when we did the joint podcast with Tana. Talk a little bit too about the what you own and how these relationships can be the mirrors for the things that you need to own. Because I think that can also be like a good, for me anyway, it helps me like get into the reframe of like, no, like this isn't all their fault. I have equal opportunity in this situation.
Largely, that's so relationship as a whole is our like it's our biggest catalyst for growth. And I think a very useful exercise is to see relationships as a mirror. And so that means like another person is how I experience myself. If there's something I'm expecting of another person, if there's something they're doing that's like triggering me, that's like inside me. My work is like how I feel. And what we try to do is, because they may be acting in a way that reminds us of something that's like very painful to us from our past. So it's like showing us our wounds. And, you very commonly see this in romantic relationships, right? That's why they're so difficult, is because in order to, when we're talking about this intimacy of a romantic relationship, it's just like, it's this continually confronting myself through another person. That could be exhausting. It's very difficult to see when you're in the middle of it. But, they're just mirroring, especially in romantic relationships where we're talking about this idea of love, that our relationship with love and love relationships comes from our caregivers. And so a lot of the things they're going to be showing us is all the ways we didn't feel loved growing up. And so, whether that's withdrawing or avoiding things or, not seeing me in the way I want them to, or requiring extra expectations of me. It's just kind of using that lens is very helpful to discover yourself, because it's just like, why do I react so much to this? Right. It's never the thing in front of you. It's always traced back to a bunch of other things. That's why paying attention to what we feel in our nervous system is so important, because that's all the stored information. So everything they're showing me is just reminding me of what I believe about that situation. And so we tend to like blame the other person a lot of times, but what if they're just there to show you what's holding you back, right? Because on some level, like you're disconnecting yourself, because like I'm having the big reaction to them and now I'm holding it against them. But what if like that reaction's like what I need to heal? And if I do that, now I get to grow, right? So that's why we use it as a medium for growth, is because it's kind of showing me my wounds. It's showing me like where maybe I'm out of touch, or I have unrealistic expectations of another person, or where I'm not meeting my own needs as well. So sometimes, we had an earlier conversation where it's like sometimes people don't learn to do for themselves in their lives, right? Everything else was done for them. Now they're requiring that from us, right? And that can be like a heavy load to carry, because it's just like, well, at a certain point, it's like, well, like you're an adult, right? Like, you have agency, you have power to change this. And so a lot of those relationships, it's like I'm playing a role that I didn't even fully sign up for. But that's like, usually there's something to learn on both ends of that. Usually it's like, well, I learned to play this role and this is what's familiar for me. And so I attract people that are going to take advantage of that. And so that's the recalibration, is it through the mirror of like, I don't like this dynamic. What does this dynamic remind me of earlier in life? There's always links to it. I'm sure you see at this point, it's never about right now. It's always then. And and the things that we struggle with the most is the stuff that carries the most pain for us, right? So that's where we feel not good enough, where we might feel emotionally or physically abandoned. We might be plugged into some, or shameful, we might be holding on to some really intense emotions. And this person's like showing up to show us something about ourselves. And so we get to experience that through them. And that's why with this work, we're going internal. Because if I stay at the level of external, I'm missing the lesson. I'm just like, oh, they're the problem, but I'm having all these reactions inside. Well, those aren't their reactions, or yours, right? So that's the key, is like, you've internalized information and you've made it mean certain things about yourself, and it's being seen through a negative lens. It's waking up those wounds. And so that's our opportunity for meaningful change. And that's the thing, is that's how I actually recalibrate relationships, is I start to show up differently. So when they can no longer trigger me in the same way, like, the dynamic shifts. Because when I have a reaction, it pulls me into a coping mechanism or a strategy to soothe me from that reaction. That's where we get into this place of projecting blame and that kind of stuff. But it's like, that's what keeps me stuck in the same loop, right? I'm experiencing the same thing through a different person. And so I need to break that loop by regulating my nervous system. And that means, like, I'm going to go spend time with my emotions, and I'm going to seek to understand them at a deeper level. And I'm trying to see what's really going on here, because they just woke up something that was unconscious within me. That's 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 how my software is running. It's like I have beliefs that they've bumped up against, and it's making me feel uncomfortable. These are, once again, the things we tell, the lies we tell ourselves, is like, I've made situations in my life mean negative things about myself, and they just woke that up in me. And so that's my opportunity to update my mind and form a healthier relationship with myself. Okay. So when we're recalibrating our external relationships, what we're actually doing is shifting our internal relationship with ourselves to a healthier, more self-compassionate place. Okay, so the more I forgive myself, the more I give myself that compassion, the more I'm able to offer to that to people outside me. It's always this continuous feedback loop. Just like we talked about on the podcast with Tana, it's like, my challenge is always, to any of my clients, is like, go spend time with people that you struggle the most with, because that's when you're going to learn the most about yourself, right?
Right.
So the people that drive us nuts, they're like showing us all the unresolved stuff inside, and it's uncomfortable, and it's like, we have all these reactions to it. But, as long as we're staying in the reaction, that dynamic stays in play. But when I heal something and I shift my mind about it, now I get to experience a different version of that person. So I'm coming from a healed place, so I don't have the same wound. So even if they tried to do the same thing to me, it wouldn't really affect me. Like, I've become immune to it. And so when they're not responding to the reaction anymore, they have to meet me somewhere else. Okay, so I'm going to see a different version of that person, because I'm no longer showing up in the same way. I'm a different version, right? And so that's what's like trippy about this stuff is, there's so many times where it's just like, you just like heal something, and then your next interaction with that person, it's just like, oh, it wasn't that big a deal. That's because, we actually tended to the piece that was looking for our attention, right? That's what our body's doing, is it's communicating unresolved issues to us so that we can resolve them. We're always motivated to resolve them, but it takes digging deeper into ourselves. And so this whole process, it's a self-discovery process of, I'm building a healthier relationship with myself. And then as I do that, one, I need less from other people. Like, I don't need them to like fill my abandonment wounds for me, right? Because the relationship might be built on that. I might be requiring all these things from them because I don't want to feel my own abandonment. If I just feel my abandonment and I come to peace with it, now that relationship can shift and it can be healthier, because I'm more accepting of who they are, because I don't need them in the same way. So that's what creates freedom in relationship, is like, I'm doing pretty good meeting my internal needs, so that I'm requiring less and less of other people to make me happy. And so that's the thing, we can always choose to be happy regardless of our circumstances. And that's that internal relationship. So when something doesn't go my way, is it the end of the world, or is that just like kind of the nature of life? Is like, unexpected things happen and you just have to shift and adjust. Right. And so it's this relationship with ourself that we're actually recalibrating. And that's what's like so powerful about this work is, and I see it in my life, with my parents, my brothers, like all that stuff. As I like heal those wounds, once again, like I no longer like feel the resentment or those heavy emotions in the same way, but it's also like I get to experience them and see them for who they are now, not this version of me that got wounded by something in the past, right? And so that really affects my experience where I, it just that process improves everything in your life, including all your relationships, because you're just feeling more peace inside. And when I feel more peace inside, there's less I need from outside myself.
One of the things I'm hearing you say a little bit through this, it's a throwback to many, many conversations we've had, but there is this acceptance of allowing the relationship to change and maybe even creating the space for it to change. I can imagine that sometimes when we're thinking about this idea of recalibrating a relationship, some of the pain maybe is not the right word, but I'm thinking about the resistance, right? You and I had a conversation a while ago, right, about relationships changing and my own resistance to how the relationships were changing. And like, that's what was causing the problem. And so, what I'm trying to get to is this idea of like, let's talk about like this again. This is like change and acceptance of change.
We cling to things because that's what we know. And when we're clinging to it, it's under this like guise that whatever was in the past is better. Is going to be better than what's in the future. Right. So I don't know what the future's like, but I have to be willing to risk that. I have to be, if I make this adjustment, will this person like leave me? Will I be abandoned? That's the fear behind it all, is like, I don't want to be alone. The easiest fix to all that is like being really comfortable being alone. Right. And so that when you do this work, you can get there, right? Where it's just like, oh, I feel good when I'm by myself. I don't really need this stuff. But then it's that fear of what will this change mean? Like, how will this person react? Will I lose them? They all are risks. Like if I stop being that person for, if I stop meeting those needs, or if I stop showing up in that way for that person, if the relationship's built on that, there is a chance that might ruin the relationship. But I'm actually like, if I'm on the growth path, like I have to trust that, okay, well, like I've outgrown that version. And so there's a better version coming. It's always this trust in the future. It's like trusting that being authentic to yourself will always lead to better things. And it's also that if something needs to fall away, then that's what needed to happen. But like I couldn't continue to force myself to be something I'm not, to exist in that system, because that self-sacrifice really wears on us. And so, you do see this a lot in families where it's like everybody's got their role and everybody's expected to be a certain way. And if you're not that way, then you get like shamed for it, or, whatever. So, and that's the thing is that goes against our instincts. We don't want to be abandoned. We don't want to be the outcast. We don't want to be that stuff. Right. And so as you do this work, you get more comfortable with yourself, and then you get, once again, more okay with needing less and less from other people. So you start to walk this path where it's like me being true to myself is the top priority. And I want to attract things from that place. I want relationships that fit who I am rather than me having to pretend to be something I'm not. Right. And because that's the biggest pain any of us have, is that it's like not safe to be me. Right. And so our best relationships are where we feel fully accepted. We don't feel like we have to like censor or filter ourselves. And so the ones that we have to do that the most are the ones that those are the relationships we don't really like. Okay. And so it's just this, the mind's always going to prefer what's known to what's unknown, right? Just because it's got all this data behind it and knows what to expect. That's all it's trying to do, is take the past and put it into the future. But if we're trying to break a pattern, we have to dismantle the past and we have to wander into the unknown. And everybody has free will. They can make their own choices. Like if this relationship no longer suits them because maybe they're not getting what they needed from me anymore. Maybe what they needed was out of balance, and maybe they had too high expectations. Maybe it's like something they should be doing for themselves. Then, it's like I the longer I hold on to that with the awareness of this isn't working, the more pain that's going to cause me, because I'm not honoring myself. And so that's the thing, is like change is the nature of life. Everything is always shifting and changing, and it's our resistance to that change that's what causes suffering. Okay, so if I'm not moving with life, I'm stuck in the past, but like life's continuing to move anyway, right? And so there's this gap that starts to grow where I'm holding on to something because I know what it is rather than me trusting that there's better things coming, because that's what life is. It's this continual expansion if we allow it to be, right? We should always be moving forward. And when we have trauma and pain and things that like have made us feel unsafe, if we have abandonment, quite literally part of us gets stuck in the past, and we're terrified to move forward, and we lower our standards too, because it's like, well, if I have somebody, at least I have somebody, right? At least I'm not all alone. And that feeds into like, okay, well, as long as I'm like easy as possible, as long as like I give everything to this person, maybe they'll like me, right? But that's not always the case. There's some people that you could give them the world and it still wouldn't be good enough, right? And so it's all about honoring yourself at the end of the day. And when you really own your value, that's this trust that, okay, if I walk away, I believe that I can create something new. I believe I can find new people to interact with. And, people that will appreciate me for who I am, and the people that are more aligned with where I'm functioning from. And, because we don't all need to be on the same level, but it's just like, I want to be in tune with what levels we're on so I can adjust my expectations in accordance with that. It's more of just like, okay, yeah, there's this mismatch here. Yeah, this is more of a surface level relationship. I like to be deep most of the time. So it's like, but yeah, I can go there once in a while and that's not going to hurt me. I don't need to like pull them down to where I'm at because they probably don't want to do that. So it's just kind of accepting everybody at where they're functioning from, and we're all on different paths. We're all on different journeys, and so that's say like much of life really is about this like courage to walk alone, but that doesn't mean you're like alone. It means you're not like betraying yourself all the time to exist in these systems.
There's some nuance there for sure, because people can get caught in that alone word. I do have one more thought. I think we have time for it. And that is like vulnerability in relationships. I was listening to a thing earlier today where the speaker, I can't remember his name, was sort of defining vulnerability as it doesn't mean like spilling your childhood secrets or talking about your parents or any of that sort of stuff. But it is a necessary step for authentic relationships. And so maybe you can just talk a little bit about your ideas or your take on the importance of vulnerability in recalibrating relationships.
I mean, vulnerability is how we form a connection with somebody. We have to reveal who we really are for them to truly see us. And if we're not doing that, if we're just wearing the mask and pretending, if we're just going along with things or playing it safe and just like being easy, those types of things, that's going to leave us feeling a bit empty inside, because we're not feeling seen. We're not feeling appreciated for who we are, like all that stuff. This idea of vulnerability, it's really like what you're doing is you're giving somebody a piece of information that's like a risk. This could go either way, but that's what we have to do to grow relationships, is we have to express how we truly feel. And yeah, it doesn't have to be like pouring your heart out. It could just be like sharing something that maybe like isn't seen as like fully acceptable in whatever realm you're in, right? It could be societal norms. It could be, whatever. If you're in church, it could be like, a disagreement with something. It could be you're showing like these aspects of like, yeah, I have my own opinion on something, or I'm feeling this way. And you're basically giving the other person a window into who you are and what you're struggling with. And the deal is it's the human experience, right? So we all have like similar things. It's just whether people are willing to acknowledge or recognize them. That's that key of like, okay, I'm going to give this person a piece of information about me that they could use to like shame me, or they could use in a negative way, but like I'm trusting them with that. If they meet that trust and they make me feel seen, or they can relate to me there, now I just grew the relationship because we understand each other at a deeper level now. in any relationship, it's like who you relate to. So that's like people like you see things in a similar manner, right? So there's like a resonance there. So the people you vibe with, we think similar ways. It doesn't, there's nuance to it. It doesn't have to be the exact same ways, but it's like we have enough commonality that it feels pretty easy to be around this person. But I might run into a roadblock where I might have like buried something in shame where like I don't want anybody to see it. And I might be making a big deal out of it. But if I was to just like open that up and share it with people that are safe, like, that once again grows the relationship. That they're able to see me in this way that, they can have compassion for me rather than attack me for that shame, right? If you're vulnerable with the wrong people, they will use it against you, and that's what the risk is. But that's the risk we have to take to have authentic relationships. Because if not, I'm just hiding and I'm playing it safe. And that's never going to be fulfilling because I'm not fully being me. I'm adjusting myself to gain acceptance rather than me just being me, and whoever accepts that, great. Whoever doesn't, great too, right? Like I'm not willing to sacrifice myself and go into that because I'm more attached to living this authentic life. And so we do that with vulnerability. We reveal layers of ourselves to the people around us, and that's a filter. It it shows us like who's comfortable with that. It shows us who's uncomfortable with that, and whether they judge us for it or not, and that kind of thing. And so that's the difficult place, is like many of us have wounds over being criticized and judged, embarrassed, things like that. And that's why we put on the mask is we're trying to avoid all that stuff. But if I'm just continually adjusting to other people and just being comfortable and safe, that's never going to deepen, right? That's always just going to stay at that surface level. And so I'm not going to be feeling connection with anybody anyway. I could be in a room full of people, a room full of friends, and if I feel like I have to be a certain way, like I'm going to feel alone in that room, right? It doesn't really matter. So this idea of connection is about, really revealing ourselves at increasingly deeper levels. And that's how you build a healthy relationship, is like, you don't just like start like pouring your heart and soul out. It's just like, yeah, like getting to know this person. And as I feel safe, I start to reveal layers of myself to that person and see how they react to it. If they're accepting of it, or if they relate to it, now we have more common ground. And so you just keep going deeper, and that's where those alignments happen. I feel more I feel more connected to this person because they accept me for who they are, who I am, but they also like can see me and witness me without judging me.
So this has been, I think, an enlightening conversation. So if you were to, throw out your kind of key takeaways or things you would want people to think about on this topic, what would those be?
Yeah, so I would say like anytime we're wanting to improve a relationship, that is going to take some risk. That's going to take us showing up differently. And, it would kind of serve you to do that deeper work where you take a look into yourself and you try and understand what it is you're not at peace with, and like what adjustments you would like to make, and building up the courage to communicate those things. A lot of these things, we stuff them inside and we build them up to the point where they're scary, and then we feel like we can't express that, right? And so a lot of relationships get ruined because of the things that are left unsaid. And so, sometimes if we just speak up, but like it can make all the difference. It's just being authentic with yourself. Like, what is it you need at this point in your life? What relationships aren't working for you anymore? What relationships do we need some adjustments on? And which ones like flat out don't work, right? And honoring yourself, living authentically is always going to win, right? That's always going to be the most fulfilling. That's always going to make you feel the most connected to yourself. That's always going to make you feel the most accepted because you're accepting yourself. When we go off track and we're trying to be somebody we're not, that creates a deep void inside because we inherently think there's something wrong with who we are. And so that creates a lot of problems where we're always just trying to mask that pain. So it's always about this risk of, my alignment is more important than everything else. And so I have to take the time to get clear on what that is, and just take inventory of my relationships around me, and see like where some adjustments can be made that are going to that are going to support my alignment rather than feed into who I used to be. Life is this continuous evolution. We're always growing, shifting, and changing. And if we're resisting that, we're stagnating. So it's like, it's very important to be real about this stuff, because that's oftentimes what allows our path to continue on the growth path. Is we're not staying stuck in the past. We're continually stepping further into who we really are. And that's where you really own your power. That's where you feel really good about yourself. That's where you have the most confidence. So, and, I would say, even if we want to go through the lens of peak performance, that's being comfortable in your own skin, being relaxed in who you are, right? Those are all the things we're trying to get to that benefits every area of life. So it's a worthwhile journey to, take an assessment and take a deeper look at some things, and, just ask yourself some questions on what adjustments can be made and what does it take to make those adjustments. And then on the other end, we got to risk, like, hey, this person might not be on board with this, and that's okay. Like, I have to trust that better things are coming.
Awesome. So if someone is made it to the end of this podcast and they're like, I want some help doing those things, and they're interested in working with you one-on-one, let's talk about the best places for people to find you, and if you have anything coming up that you want to talk about.
Yeah, so if you would like to go deeper, you can visit my website, brandonthielk.com. So I offer a free 30-minute strategy session on there, and I just get to know you a little bit better and share how I can help and the path I see us taking. And also on my website, you can sign up for my newsletter. Right now, there's no other group things going on yet. I'll probably be launching some stuff after the new year. And yeah, if you want to follow along on YouTube and Instagram at Brandon Thielk, and TikTok is at bthelk. So post out there regularly if you like content like this. And of course, subscribe to the podcast, and share some comments. Tell us whether you like it or not, or if you have some suggestions on some topics you'd like us to talk about. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Talk to you later, Brandon.